I watched in horror as my sister Heather slapped my 8-year-old daughter Emma hard across the face during our family reunion. Her crime? Being too noisy while playing with her cousins. The sound of that slap silenced the entire backyard. But what broke my heart was what followed. Heather sneered. Like mother, like daughter, both are useless. Then my father nodded and said, "Well, she needed to learn some shame." I stood frozen, unaware that the family reunion microphone was broadcasting everything to relatives watching online. Growing up as the second daughter in the Anderson family meant living in Heather's shadow. From our childhood in suburban Connecticut, she was the golden child, the perfect student, the accomplished musician, while I was always seen as the disappointment. Heather took after our father, ambitious and calculating, graduating at the top of her class from Yale Law School, before joining a prestigious firm in Boston. At 36, she had everything our parents valued: a corner office, a strategic marriage to another attorney, 2 perfectly behaved children, and the social standing they had always craved. I took a different path that my family never approved of. I fell in love with Daniel, a kind-hearted military man, with a warm laugh and strong values. My parents thought I was throwing my life away when we married at 22. "You could have done so much better than some soldier," my mother Carol would say with thinly veiled disgust. When Daniel was deployed overseas 4 years ago and killed in action, leaving me to raise Emma alone, my family barely acknowledged our loss. No comfort, just subtle implications that I had made my bed and now had to lie in it. At 32, I was working 2 jobs, as an administrative assistant during the day and online customer service representative at night, struggling to provide Emma with everything she needed. We lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment that felt like a palace compared to the emotional coldness of my parents' sprawling lakeside property. Emma was diagnosed with ADHD last year, something my family refused to acknowledge as legitimate. "She just needs discipline, Katie," my mother would say during our rare phone calls. All these labels are just excuses for poor parenting. Despite the consistent criticism, Emma was the light of my life, creative, loving, and yes, sometimes loud and energetic in a way that my perfectly composed family couldn't understand. Her therapist assured me she was making great progress with her emotional regulation, but certain situations still overwhelmed her. The annual Anderson family reunion at my parents' lake house was something I'd avoided for the past 2 years. But Emma had been asking about her cousins, Heather's children, Taylor and Jackson, who she rarely got to see. "Please, Mommy," she had begged. "I promise I'll be super good." The fact that my 8-year-old felt she needed to promise perfect behavior just to see her family broke my heart. I reluctantly accepted the invitation, hoping that maybe, finally, things would be different. From the moment we arrived at the sprawling lake house with its manicured gardens and imposing stone facade, the tension was palpable. My mother greeted Emma with a stiff pat on the head and a critical once-over of her casual play clothes. "Couldn't you have dressed her more appropriately, Katie?" she whispered as Emma ran off to find her cousins. "Everyone else's children look presentable." Throughout the afternoon, the jabs continued. Heather made sure to loudly discuss her children's private school achievements within earshot. My father James took every opportunity to point out how successful his friends' children had become, with pointed glances in my direction. My mother criticized everything from my hair to my career choices, all under the guise of helpful advice. I was standing by the drinks table, taking a moment to compose myself, when I overheard Heather speaking to our cousin Tiffany. "It's sad, really," Heather said, not bothering to lower her voice. "Katie had so much potential, but she threw it all away. And now look at her child, completely undisciplined. It's what happens when you choose wrong and refuse to admit it." I gripped my plastic cup so hard it cracked, but I said nothing. I had learned long ago that confrontation only made things worse with my family. The children were playing a game of tag near the outdoor seating area where the adults were gathered. Emma was laughing, her face flushed with excitement as she ran from her cousin Taylor. She was having fun, being a normal 8-year-old child. When she raced past the adults' conversation circle for the 3rd time, my sister frowned. "Emma, the adults are trying to talk. Go play somewhere else." Emma slowed down but was too caught up in the game to fully register the warning. A few minutes later, she came running back, this time with something in her hands. "Aunt Heather, Taylor, "Look what I found by the lake," she called out excitedly, her voice carrying across the yard. She was holding what looked like an unusually shaped rock or shell, her scientific curiosity piqued. That was when it happened. As Emma approached, still talking excitedly about her discovery, Heather stood up, grabbed my daughter by the arm, and slapped her hard across the face. The sound seemed to echo across the suddenly silent gathering. Emma's small body froze, the precious find dropping from her hand to the ground. Her eyes filled with tears of shock and confusion. The 5 seconds after Heather slapped Emma felt like 5 hours. My body was paralyzed as my brain struggled to process what had just happened. Emma's small hand went to her reddening cheek, her eyes wide with confusion and hurt. The silence hanging over the backyard was suffocating until Heather broke it with her cruel words. "Like mother, like daughter, both are useless." She laughed loudly, turning to make sure our family circle had heard her clever assessment. My father James leaned back in his chair, that familiar smirk on his face, and nodded. Well, she needed to learn some shame. A few uncomfortable chuckles rippled through the gathering. My mother Carol looked briefly concerned, not about the violence toward her granddaughter, but about appearances. "Perhaps we should move inside for dessert," she suggested smoothly, as if nothing unusual had occurred. What was most chilling was that no one, not one person among my extended family, stood up or said anything. Some looked uncomfortable, but their silence was a thundering endorsement. My paralysis finally broke. I rushed to Emma, kneeling to wrap my arms around her trembling body. Her tears were soaking my shoulder as she hiccuped. "What did I do wrong, Mommy?" "I just wanted to show them my rock." "Nothing, baby," I whispered, my voice shaking with rage and heartbreak. "You did absolutely nothing wrong." I stood up, Emma's hand firmly in mine. "We're leaving. Now." "Don't be so dramatic, Katie," Heather rolled her eyes. She was being disruptive. Someone had to teach her. "By hitting her?" My voice was barely controlled. "Oh, please, it was hardly a hit." "Stop overreacting," Heather dismissed me, with a wave of her perfectly manicured hand. "This is exactly why she behaves the way she does. No boundaries." I turned to leave, guiding Emma toward the house so we could collect our things, when my father stepped in front of us, blocking our path. "Sit down, Katie," he said in that authoritative tone that had intimidated me my entire life. "You're making a scene over nothing. This family drama of yours is getting old." "Move, Dad," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "Katie." My mother's voice had that warning edge. "Don't ruin the reunion. Everyone's having such a lovely time." I was about to respond when I felt a light touch on my arm. It was my cousin Amanda, my mother's sister's daughter who had always been kind to me. Her face was pale as she held out her phone to me, angling it so only I could see the screen. "You need to see this," she whispered. On the screen was a live stream of the family reunion. I had completely forgotten that my tech-enthusiastic father had set up cameras and microphones around the property to broadcast the event to relatives who couldn't attend in person. The chat sidebar was exploding with comments. "Did she just hit that child? What kind of monster slaps a little girl for being excited? Those parents are condoning child abuse. Someone needs to help Katie and her daughter get out of there." With a sickening realization, I understood that dozens of extended family members had just witnessed Heather's assault and my parents' approval of it. Amanda leaned closer. "I saved the video already," she whispered. "In case they try to delete it." I nodded my thanks, still processing the implications. "Is everything all right?" My mother's voice was sharper now, suspicious of our whispered exchange. Before I could answer, my phone rang. The screen showed a number I recognized immediately: Colonel Winters, Daniel's former commanding officer, who had delivered the news of his death and had checked in on us periodically since then. He had become something of a father figure to both of us. "I need to take this," I said, stepping away with Emma still clutched to my side. "Katie," Colonel Winters' voice was serious. "I was on the family live stream. Your cousin invited me to join. Are you and Emma safe? Do you need me to come get you?" I felt a rush of gratitude so intense it nearly knocked me over. Someone had seen. Someone cared. Someone was willing to act. "We're leaving now," I told him, my voice steadier. "But yes, we could use a friend right now." "I'm 20 minutes away," he said without hesitation. Text me your location when you're clear of the house. I'll meet you. As I ended the call, I turned to see my sister watching me with narrowed eyes. Who was that? Your latest charity case? Another sad sack military friend of Daniel's? Something inside me shifted at the casual cruelty in her dismissal of Daniel's memory and his friends who had become our support system. We're leaving, I repeated, louder this time so everyone could hear. And let me be perfectly clear, Heather. If you ever touch my daughter again, it won't be a family reunion video you'll need to worry about. It will be a police report. Heather's face flushed with anger. Are you threatening me? I was disciplining an out-of-control child when her mother was too weak to do it. She's 8 years old and was excited about a rock she found, I said, my voice carrying across the now silent gathering. The only out-of-control person here is the grown woman who thinks it's acceptable to slap a child. I turned to my parents. And the people who think that's something to laugh about and approve of. My father's face darkened with anger. You're overreacting as usual, Katie. This victim mentality of yours is tiresome. Goodbye, Dad, I said simply, guiding Emma toward the house. As we walked away, I heard my mother call after us, Katie. Don't you dare leave like this. Katie. For the first time in my life, I didn't turn around at the sound of her command. We gathered our overnight bags quickly, Emma still sniffling quietly. As we reached the front door, Amanda appeared with her own purse and car keys. I'll drive you wherever you need to go, she offered. I'm not staying here after that. In the car, Emma curled against me in the back seat as Amanda drove us to a small diner, about 10 miles from the lake house, where Colonel Winters had agreed to meet us. The comments are still coming in, Amanda said, glancing at her phone when we parked. People are horrified, Katie. No one thinks what Heather did was okay. Why didn't anyone say anything then? I asked, the question that had been burning in my mind. Amanda looked ashamed. We've all been conditioned for so long to never contradict Uncle James or Aunt Carol or precious Heather. It's like we're all still children at that table, afraid to speak up. She reached back to gently touch Emma's hand. But that doesn't make it right. I'm sorry I didn't say something right away, Emma. Emma nodded solemnly, then looked up at me. Are we in trouble, Mommy? I hugged her close. No, sweetheart, we're not in trouble. We did nothing wrong. But Aunt Heather might be, Amanda added, showing me her phone again. Someone shared the video on social media, tagging Heather's law firm. People are pretty upset. As we sat there, I realized this incident wasn't going to simply disappear like all the other family conflicts that had been swept under the rug over the years. The public nature of what happened meant there would be consequences, not just for me and Emma, but for Heather and my parents too. Colonel Winters arrived, his tall frame and military bearing instantly recognizable as he entered the diner. Emma ran to him, and he scooped her up in a gentle hug. Hey there, brave girl, he said softly. That was a pretty tough situation back there, huh? Emma nodded against his shoulder. He set her down and turned to me. You okay, Katie? I will be, I said, realizing as I spoke that I meant it. Something had broken free inside me today, some chain of obligation and fear that had bound me to my toxic family for too long. As we sat in that small diner booth, with Amanda and Colonel Winters offering support and kindness, I knew that whatever happened next, Emma and I wouldn't be facing it alone. The video of Heather slapping Emma spread faster than I could have imagined. By the next morning, it had moved beyond family circles and into the broader community. Amanda called to tell me it had been shared in several local Facebook groups with titles like Lawyer Assaults Child at Family Gathering and Prominent Boston Attorney Caught on Video Slapping Niece. I kept Emma home from school that Monday, concerned about how she was processing everything. We spent the morning baking cookies and talking through her feelings in the gentle way her therapist had taught us. Her cheek no longer showed a mark, but the emotional impact was evident in her quieter demeanor and the way she kept asking if she'd done something wrong. You did nothing wrong, I repeated, kneeling to look her in the eyes. Sometimes grown-ups make bad choices, and that's not the child's fault, ever. My phone had been buzzing consistently with calls and texts from my parents, which I ignored. Finally, I listened to one voicemail from my mother. Catherine, Elizabeth, she began, using my full name as she always did when she was angry. This has gone far enough. You need to call us immediately and help fix this mess you've created. Your sister is facing serious consequences at her firm over your dramatics. Some of those clients are threatening to take their business elsewhere. Your father and I expect you to issue a public statement, clarifying that this was a family misunderstanding blown out of proportion. Call us back immediately. Not one word of concern for Emma. Not one acknowledgement that Heather had done anything wrong. Somehow, this was all my fault for not controlling the narrative. I deleted the message and blocked their numbers, something I should have done years ago. Later that afternoon, I received an email from Heather. The subject line was, "Legal Notice," and my stomach dropped as I opened it to find a formal letter from her law firm, threatening to sue me for defamation if I didn't cease and desist from making false allegations of assault and take immediate action to remove all social media content related to the incident. I hadn't posted anything myself, but apparently that didn't matter. According to Heather, I was responsible for the damage to her reputation because I had engineered a scene at the family reunion. I was still staring at the email, my hands shaking with a mixture of anger and anxiety, when there was a knock at my apartment door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and a moment of panic shot through me as I wondered if Heather or my parents had come to confront me in person. Looking through the peephole, I saw Heather standing there in one of her perfectly tailored business suits, a leather portfolio clutched in her hand. My first instinct was not to answer, but I knew she had likely seen my car in the parking lot. "Emma, honey." I called softly to my daughter who was coloring at the kitchen table. "Can you go play in your room for a little bit? Put on your headphones with that audiobook you like." Once Emma was safely out of earshot, I opened the door but didn't invite Heather in. "What do you want?" I asked, blocking the entrance. "We need to talk," she said, her voice professionally calm. "May I come in?" "No," I replied. "Say what you need to say from there." Her jaw tightened with annoyance. "This is childish, Katie. I'm trying to handle this like adults." "Adults don't slap children for being excited about rocks," I countered. "What do you want, Heather?" She pulled papers from her portfolio. "I've prepared a statement for you to release. It explains that what happened at the reunion was taken out of context and exaggerated online. It states that I was helping discipline my niece at the request of her mother, and that we've resolved any misunderstanding privately as a family." I stared at her in disbelief. "That's a complete lie." "It's damage control," she corrected coldly. "Do you have any idea what this is doing to my career? To Mom and Dad's standing in the community? Their club friends are all talking. And that's more important than the fact that you hit my child?" I asked incredulously. Heather's professional veneer cracked slightly. "It was barely a slap. For God's sake, when did you become so soft? You're raising that child to be completely unprepared for the real world." "The real world doesn't involve adults hitting you for being enthusiastic," I said. "At least, it shouldn't." She thrust the papers toward me. "Sign this, Katie, or I'll be forced to pursue legal action. My firm represents that children's charity Mom Chairs, for heaven's sake. Do you know how this looks? All because you couldn't control your daughter and then blew everything out of proportion." "I didn't take the papers. I didn't post anything, Heather. I didn't ask anyone to share the video. I just refused to pretend what you did was okay." "Well, your refusal has consequences," she snapped. "My firm has put me on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. Clients are threatening to leave. Is that what you wanted? To ruin my life because I disciplined your out-of-control child?" "Emma has ADHD," I said quietly. "She's not out of control, she's neurodivergent. And even if she was just being a normal, excited kid, nothing justifies what you did." Heather scoffed. "ADHD. Just another excuse for bad parenting. Mom and Dad are right about you, Katie. You've always taken the easy way out, always made excuses instead of putting in the work." Something inside me finally snapped. All the years of belittling, of being made to feel less than, of accepting their narrative about who I was, it all crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. "The easy way out?" I repeated, my voice deceptively calm. "Was it the easy way out when I held my husband's folded flag at his funeral while you and our parents sat stiffly in the back row, leaving the moment it was over? Was it the easy way out when I worked 2 jobs while grieving to make sure Emma had everything she needed? Was it the easy way out when I took her to specialist after specialist to get her the support she needs while you and Mom dismissed her diagnosis as an excuse? I stepped closer to Heather, who actually took a small step back. I have never taken the easy way out, Heather. The easy way would have been to accept the family money with all the strings attached. The easy way would have been to marry someone our parents approved of, instead of following my heart. The easy way would have been to let you and Mom and Dad continue treating Emma and me like we're somehow defective because we don't fit your narrow definition of success. I pointed to her papers. I will not sign that. I will not lie to protect you from the consequences of your own actions. If you want to sue me, go ahead. But know that if you do, I'll countersue for assault of a minor. And I have video evidence and dozens of witnesses. Heather's face flushed with anger. You ungrateful little nothing. After everything our parents have done for you. Done for me? I laughed bitterly. What exactly have they done except criticize and undermine me at every turn? When have they ever been there when I actually needed them? They gave you life, a home, an education, she listed mechanically. The bare minimum, I corrected. That's not love, Heather. That's legal obligation. She shoved the papers back in her portfolio. You're going to regret this, Katie. When you're completely cut off from the family, when Emma grows up knowing her mother chose pride over her future, you'll regret it. As she turned to leave, she added, Don't come crying to any of us when your pathetic little life falls apart without our help. I watched her walk away, her heels clicking angrily on the corridor floor. I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart pounding but my mind surprisingly calm. For the first time in my adult life, I had stood up to Heather without backing down, without accepting her version of reality. I had a feeling she was right about one thing, though. This wasn't over. The battle lines had been drawn, and my toxic family wasn't going to let me walk away without a fight. When Emma emerged from her room later, she asked if everything was okay. I hugged her tight and promised her that no matter what happened, we would face it together. Are you sad, Mommy? She asked perceptively. A little, I admitted. But I'm also proud of us for standing up for what's right. That night, as I tucked Emma into bed, she asked a question that broke my heart all over again. Mommy, she whispered, her small face serious in the glow of her nightlight. Did I deserve to be hit? In that moment, looking at my precious child, wondering if violence against her was justified, I knew with absolute certainty that I could never allow my family back into our lives unless fundamental things changed. The cycle of emotional abuse that had shaped my childhood would end with me. No, baby, I said firmly. No child ever deserves to be hit. Not for being loud, not for being excited, not for anything. What Aunt Heather did was wrong. What Grandma and Grandpa said was wrong. And I will never let anyone treat you that way again. As Emma drifted off to sleep, I made a silent promise to her and to myself. Whatever storm was coming, we would weather it together and emerge stronger on the other side. The week following the family reunion incident brought changes I never could have anticipated. My phone rang early Tuesday morning as I was getting Emma ready for school. I didn't recognize the number but answered anyway. Is this Catherine Anderson? A woman's voice asked. Yes, this is Katie, I replied cautiously. My name is Judy Wilson. I live in the apartment next door to yours. We've said hello a few times in the laundry room. I remembered her, an older woman with silver hair, who always had a kind smile. Yes, of course. Is everything okay? Well, dear, I wanted to reach out because I saw the video of what happened with your daughter. It's making the rounds in some of the local community groups. My stomach dropped. I wanted you to know that I think you handled it admirably, she continued, surprising me. Standing up to family like that takes tremendous courage. Thank you, I said, unsure how to respond. I should have introduced myself properly before, but I'm a retired family therapist. I specialized in family systems and childhood trauma for 30 years before retiring. If you and your daughter need someone to talk to, I'd be happy to help. I felt a rush of gratitude at her offer. That's incredibly kind of you. Not at all. Good neighbors look out for each other. And Katie? What happened to your daughter was wrong. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. After we hung up, I sat for a moment, processing this unexpected support. I had been so conditioned by my family to believe that I was always overreacting, always too sensitive, that having a professional validate my feelings was powerful. When I dropped Emma off at school, her teacher, Miss Thompson, asked to speak with me privately. Emma mentioned there was an incident with family over the weekend, she said gently. I wanted to check in and see if there's anything we can do to support her here at school. I hesitated, unsure how much to share, when Miss Thompson added, Several parents have seen the video. We want you to know that we stand with you and Emma. More support came from an unexpected quarter when my boss called me into his office that afternoon. Mr. Reynolds was usually brusque and businesslike, focused entirely on productivity and deadlines. I worried he'd seen the video and was concerned about the company being associated with family drama. Katie, he began, as I took a seat across from his desk. I don't usually get involved in my employees' personal lives. I understand, sir, I started, preparing to apologize for any negative attention. He held up a hand to stop me. Let me finish. I don't usually get involved, but when my wife showed me that video last night, I felt I needed to make an exception. His expression softened slightly. My sister and I grew up in a household where that kind of behavior was common. I want you to know that this company supports you completely. He slid a business card across the desk. This is the contact information for our corporate attorney. If you need legal advice or representation, the company will cover it as part of our employee assistance program. I stared at the card in disbelief. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, he replied. Just know that if you need time off to deal with this situation, or if you need flexible hours for your daughter, we can accommodate that. By Thursday, I had received messages of support from 5 different parents from Emma's school, 3 neighbors, and even the barista at the coffee shop I visited each morning, who recognized me from the video. Each person expressed outrage at what Heather had done and offered help in various ways. But the most surprising ally emerged on Friday evening, when there was a knock at my apartment door. When I opened it, I found my cousin Amanda standing there with 3 other cousins from my mother's side of the family, Jessica, Stephanie, and Ryan. Can we come in? Amanda asked. We need to talk. Once they were seated in my small living room, Emma happily occupied with a movie in her bedroom. Jessica spoke first. We wanted you to know that we're on your side, Katie. What Heather did was inexcusable, and Aunt Carol and Uncle James's reaction was appalling. Thank you, I said, still surprised by their visit. Ryan, who had always been quiet at family gatherings, cleared his throat. The thing is, Katie, this isn't an isolated incident. The way they treat you, the way they've always treated you, it's part of a pattern. What do you mean? I asked. The 4 of them exchanged glances before Stephanie spoke up. We've all experienced it too, just not as openly or consistently as you have. Aunt Carol and Uncle James play favorites, manipulate people, use money and social standing as weapons. They've always targeted you the most, because you're the one who actually stood up to them, Amanda added. You married for love, instead of status. You made choices based on what you wanted, not what they wanted for you. We should have said something years ago, Jessica said quietly. But it was easier to keep our heads down and stay in their good graces. We were cowards. You weren't cowards, I protested. They've spent decades perfecting their manipulation tactics. They're experts at making you doubt yourself. Ryan nodded. That's why we're here now. We wanted you to know that we're done being silent. If Heather, or Aunt Carol or Uncle James tries to turn the family against you, they'll have to go through us first. And there's something else, Amanda said, reaching into her purse. I got a call from Aunt Susan yesterday. My mom's sister? I asked in surprise. I haven't seen her in years. That's because she's been deliberately excluded, Amanda explained. After she saw the video, she called me wanting your contact information. She said there are things you need to know about your parents that might help you understand why they are the way they are. She handed me a slip of paper with a phone number. She asked you to call her when you're ready. As they were leaving, Colonel Winters called to check in, as he had been doing daily. How's our girl doing? He asked, meaning Emma. Better, I said truthfully. The school counselor has been wonderful with her. Good, he said. Listen, Katie, I've been thinking. I know some folks at the Military Family Support Services who specialize in trauma. They have a great child psychologist on staff who works specifically with kids who've experienced family conflict. It's completely free for military families. Would you be interested in setting up an appointment for Emma? That would be amazing, I said, feeling overwhelmed by the generosity. Consider it done, he replied. And Katie? Daniel would be so proud of the way you're protecting your daughter. That night, after Emma was asleep, I sat at my kitchen table looking at the slip of paper with Aunt Susan's number. I hadn't seen her since I was a teenager. She and my mother had had some mysterious falling out years ago, and she had been effectively erased from our family narrative. Taking a deep breath, I dialed the number. Hello? A warm voice answered. Aunt Susan? It's Katie. Katie Anderson. There was a moment of silence then. Oh, Katie, I've been hoping you would call. Are you and your daughter all right? We're getting there, I said. Amanda said you wanted to talk to me about my parents? Yes, she said, her voice turning serious. There are things you need to know, Katie. Things that might help you understand why your parents are the way they are, especially toward you. I'm listening, I said, bracing myself. Your mother and I grew up in a household much like the one you're escaping, she began. Our father was emotionally abusive, particularly to Carol because she was the oldest. He had impossibly high standards, and nothing she ever did was good enough. I had never known this about my mother's childhood. She rarely spoke of her parents, who had died before I was born. When Carol met your father in college, she saw in him the same drive for perfection, the same obsession with appearances and success. But instead of running from those traits, she embraced them. She thought that if she could create the perfect family, achieve enough success, she could finally win the approval she never got as a child. That doesn't excuse how they treat Emma and me, I said. No, it doesn't, Aunt Susan agreed firmly. Nothing excuses abuse. But understanding the pattern might help you break it completely. She paused before continuing. There's something else you should know. Something that happened when Heather was very young, before you were born. What? I asked, my heart racing. Your mother slapped Heather at a family gathering when she was about 4 years old, Aunt Susan said quietly. She was making noise, interrupting the adults. Your grandfather not only approved but praised Carol for teaching proper manners. I confronted them about it, and that was the beginning of the rift between us. I sat in stunned silence, trying to process this revelation. The parallel was chilling. History repeats itself, Katie, Aunt Susan continued. Carol became what damaged her. Heather is following the same path. But you're breaking the cycle. You're standing up and saying, no, this stops here. It's so hard, I admitted, tears filling my eyes. They make me doubt myself constantly. That's how abusers maintain control, she said gently. But you have something they never expected. Something they fear, Katie. What's that? I asked. Witnesses. Support. People who are willing to stand up and say what happened was wrong. Your parents and Heather have always relied on privacy and silence to maintain their control. But that video stripped that away. As I hung up the phone after talking with Aunt Susan for over an hour, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and strength. Understanding the generational patterns didn't excuse my family's behavior, but it helped me see that their treatment of me had never been about my worth or value. It had always been about their own unresolved trauma and insecurities. For the first time, I pitied them. And in that pity, I found freedom from their power over me. The next morning, Emma and I were making pancakes for breakfast when my phone pinged with a text from Amanda. They're planning something. Be prepared. I didn't know what that meant, but with my newfound support network and clarity, I felt ready to face whatever came next. The confrontation I had been both dreading and anticipating came the following weekend. My mother called from a number I didn't recognize, catching me off guard. We need to talk in person, she said without preamble. Your father and I will be at our house tomorrow, at 2 o'clock. Be there. It wasn't a request. Despite everything, my first instinct was still to comply, to say, yes, Mother, as I had been conditioned to do my entire life. Instead, I took a deep breath. If you want to talk, you can come to Riverside Park near my apartment, I countered. A public place. And I'll be bringing support people. There was a long pause. I could almost hear her calculating whether it was worth the concession to get what she wanted. "Fine," she finally said. "But this family matter should be resolved privately." It stopped being private when Heather slapped my daughter in front of dozens of witnesses and online viewers, I reminded her. Another silence. 2:00, don't be late. She hung up. I immediately called Amanda and Aunt Susan, who both agreed to be there with me. Colonel Winters insisted on coming too, just to keep an eye on things from a distance. I arranged for Emma to spend the afternoon with Judy, my neighbor, not wanting her to be part of this confrontation. The next day was unseasonably warm for early fall, the park filled with families enjoying the weekend sunshine. I spotted my parents before they saw me. They were standing stiffly near the fountain, looking completely out of place in their formal attire. My father in his pressed slacks and polo shirt, my mother in a tailored pantsuit, both scanning the park with thinly veiled disdain. What I didn't expect was to see Heather with them, or the small group of people standing slightly behind them, who I recognized as longtime family friends and business associates of my father. "They brought reinforcements," Amanda muttered as we approached. "Character witnesses." "Stay strong," Aunt Susan whispered. "Remember, you have nothing to be ashamed of." As we reached them, my mother's eyes widened at the sight of her estranged sister. "Susan," she said coldly, "I should have known you'd involve yourself in this drama." "Hello, Carol," Aunt Susan replied calmly. "It's been a long time." My father cut through the tension. "Let's get to the point. This has gone on long enough. Katie, this family dispute has spiraled out of control, and it's time to end it." "I agree," I said, which seemed to surprise him. "It needs to end with an acknowledgement of what happened and a sincere apology to Emma." Heather scoffed. "Typical Katie, always the victim." "We've brought some friends who have known this family for decades," my mother said, gesturing to the group behind them. "People who can attest to our character and how we've always supported you despite your challenges." "You mean people you've carefully cultivated to see only what you want them to see?" I asked. "People who weren't there when Heather assaulted my daughter?" "Assault is a very serious accusation," my father said in his lawyer voice. "One that could have serious consequences if pursued legally." "Are you threatening me?" I asked. "We're trying to help you understand the severity of what you're doing," my mother corrected. "Heather's entire career could be at stake." "And whose fault is that?" I countered. One of their friends, Mrs. Caldwell, a woman I'd known since childhood, stepped forward. "Katie, dear, we all know children can be difficult. Sometimes firm discipline is necessary. Slapping a child across the face isn't discipline, it's abuse," Amanda said firmly. "Amanda," my mother gasped. "You don't understand the situation." "Actually, I think I do," Amanda replied. "I was there, remember? I saw what happened." I reached into my bag and pulled out my tablet. "In fact, why don't we all watch what happened, so we're on the same page?" "That won't be necessary," my father said quickly. "I think it is," I insisted, queuing up the video Amanda had saved. As the video played, showing the lead up to the slap itself, and the cruel comments that followed, I watched the faces of the family friends. Their expressions changed from supportive confidence to uncomfortable shock as they witnessed the reality of what had occurred. When the video ended, there was a heavy silence. "That doesn't show the whole context," Heather said defensively. "Emma had been disruptive all day." "She's 8 years old," I said. "And she has ADHD, which you all refuse to acknowledge." "Here we go with the excuses again," my father sighed. Aunt Susan stepped forward. "James, Carol, do you hear yourselves? You're defending an adult who struck a child, your granddaughter, because she was excited about something she found. How can you possibly justify that?" "We've always believed in firm discipline," my mother said stiffly. "Like the discipline your father believed in, Carol?" Aunt Susan asked pointedly. My mother paled visibly. "That's completely different." "Is it?" Aunt Susan pressed. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like the exact same cycle repeating itself. You were slapped for speaking out of turn as a child. You slapped Heather when she was 4 for the same reason. And now Heather has slapped Emma." One of the family friends, Dr. Peterson, who had delivered both me and Heather as babies, looked shocked. "Carol, is that true?" My mother's composure cracked slightly. My father had high standards. He expected proper behavior. And did those high standards make you feel loved and secure as a child? Aunt Susan asked. Or did they make you feel like nothing you ever did was good enough? My mother didn't answer, but her silence spoke volumes. I turned to the family friends. You've all known me my whole life. Have you ever seen me be deliberately destructive or malicious? Have you ever known me to lie about something important? Several of them shifted uncomfortably, a few shaking their heads. Then why is it so hard to believe that I'm telling the truth now? That what you just saw in that video is exactly what it appears to be? An adult hitting a child for being childlike, and other adults approving of it? Mrs. Caldwell looked directly at Heather. I have to say, I was prepared to support you because I've known you since you were a little girl. But what I just saw... She shook her head. I cannot and will not defend that behavior. Dr. Peterson nodded in agreement. As a physician, I'm actually obligated to report suspected child abuse. I've refrained because Katie is clearly protecting her daughter now, but Heather, what you did was absolutely unacceptable. One by one, the character witnesses my parents had brought began to distance themselves, murmuring excuses about other appointments, and walking away from the confrontation they had expected to win easily. My father's face darkened with anger. This is ridiculous. A minor family disagreement blown completely out of proportion. It's only minor to you because you're not the one being hurt, I said quietly. It's only acceptable because it's happening to people you've decided are worth less than others, people like Emma and me. We have never thought you were worth less, my mother insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. Really? I challenged. Then why have I spent my entire life feeling like I was never good enough? Why was Heather always praised while I was criticized? Why was Daniel dismissed as not good enough for the family? Why is Emma's diagnosis treated as an excuse, rather than a legitimate condition that needs support? My parents exchanged glances, clearly unaccustomed to being questioned so directly. We only wanted what was best for you, my father said, falling back on the standard parental defense. No, I corrected. You wanted what looked best to others. There's a difference. Aunt Susan put her hand on my shoulder in silent support. Heather, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. So what do you want from us, Katie? Some tearful apology? A public self-flagellation? My career is hanging by a thread because of this. I want you to understand that what you did was wrong, I said simply. I want you to get help so you never do it again, to Emma or to your own children. I want Mom and Dad to stop enabling abusive behavior by pretending it's normal or justified. And if we don't meet your demands? My father asked coldly. Then we have nothing more to say to each other, I replied, surprised by how calm I felt. Emma and I will move forward without you in our lives. You'd cut us off from our only grandchild? My mother asked, finally showing genuine emotion. Over one incident? It's not one incident, I said firmly. It's a lifetime of incidents. The slap was just the one that finally opened my eyes to how unhealthy this family dynamic truly is. I looked at each of them in turn. I'm not asking for anything unreasonable. Just acknowledgement, a genuine apology, and a commitment to change. If you can't offer that, then, yes, I will protect my daughter from growing up thinking that being belittled, criticized, and physically struck is what love looks like. My father scoffed. Dramatic as always. But Mrs. Caldwell, who had lingered when the others left, spoke up unexpectedly. Actually, James, I think Katie is being remarkably restrained given the circumstances. My grandson has ADHD, and I would be furious if anyone laid a hand on him, family or not. My father looked genuinely surprised at this desertion from a longtime supporter. For the first time, I saw uncertainty in his eyes. We'll consider what you've said, my mother finally conceded, though her tone suggested it was primarily to save face in front of the remaining observers. As they turned to leave, Heather gave me one last cold look. This isn't over, Katie. Actually, it is, I replied. The only question is whether it ends with reconciliation or separation. That's up to you three now. Watching them walk away, I felt a complex mixture of sadness for what might have been, and relief at having finally spoken my truth without backing down. Amanda hugged me tightly. I am so proud of you." Aunt Susan smiled through tears. "You did what I wished I had been strong enough to do 30 years ago. You broke the cycle." As we walked back toward my apartment, Colonel Winters, who had been observing from a distance as promised, fell into step beside us. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "in the military, we have a saying, the most important battles are the ones you fight for others, not for yourself." He glanced down at me with respect. Daniel would be standing tall with pride today. For the first time since the family reunion, I felt the weight on my shoulders lighten. Whatever happened next, I had stood my ground. I had protected Emma. And in doing so, I had finally begun to protect myself too. The following weeks brought a storm I had been bracing for. True to form, my family didn't reflect on their actions or consider genuine change. Instead, they escalated. First came the news from Amanda that my parents were actively working to turn extended family members against me. They were calling relatives with a carefully crafted version of events, painting me as unstable, vindictive, and manipulating the situation to hurt Heather. "Most people aren't buying it," Amanda assured me, "especially those who saw the video, but some are staying neutral to avoid getting involved." Then Heather's law firm announced they were keeping her on administrative leave while they conducted a more thorough investigation. According to a cousin who worked at a company that used Heather's firm, several clients had expressed concerns about having someone with questionable judgment around children representing family-friendly brands. Rather than taking responsibility, Heather's anger toward me intensified. She sent increasingly hostile emails accusing me of deliberately orchestrating her professional downfall. "She genuinely believes you plotted this whole thing," Amanda said, after forwarding me Heather's latest message to the family. "Like you somehow tricked her into slapping Emma on camera." I might have found it almost darkly comical, if not for what came next. On Tuesday morning, I received a call from Miss Thompson at Emma's school. "Katie, I wanted to let you know about a concerning interaction we had this morning," she said, her voice tense. "A woman identifying herself as your mother called the office, asking detailed questions about Emma's behavior and academic performance. She implied there were some family custody issues being discussed." My blood ran cold. "What did she say exactly?" "She suggested that Emma might be better off in a more structured environment with her and your father, given your working situation." When our administrative assistant explained that we can't discuss student information without proper authorization, she became quite insistent. I thanked Miss Thompson for alerting me and immediately called Colonel Winters for advice. "Document everything," he said firmly. "Every call, every email, every interaction. If they're laying groundwork for some kind of custody challenge, even an informal one, you need to be prepared." That afternoon, my boss called me into his office again. "Katie, did you know your sister is an attorney at Davis, Hoffman & Reed?" he asked. "Yes," I replied cautiously. "Why?" He looked uncomfortable. "Someone from that firm called our HR department this morning asking questions about your employment status, work hours, and performance records. They claimed it was related to a family matter." My hands clenched into fists as I realized what was happening. They were building a case against me, trying to paint me as an inadequate mother to justify their interference with Emma. "They're gathering ammunition," I told Amanda that evening as Emma played in her room. "Can they actually do anything legally?" she asked. "I don't think so," I said. "I'm Emma's only legal parent since Daniel died. But they could make things very difficult, spread rumors in the community, maybe even try for some kind of grandparent visitation." I called the lawyer Mr. Reynolds had recommended, who confirmed that my parents would have little legal standing, but advised documenting everything meticulously just in case. The stress began taking a visible toll on Emma. She started having nightmares, waking up crying and asking if her grandparents were going to take her away. Her school counselor reported that she seemed anxious and withdrawn, a stark contrast to her usual enthusiastic, if sometimes over-energetic, personality. The breaking point came a week later when I received a formal letter from my parents' attorney. It stated that James and Carol Anderson were deeply concerned about the welfare of their granddaughter and believed she would benefit from the stability and resources they could provide. They were requesting regular, unsupervised visitation and suggested that if I refused, they would be forced to explore other legal options. Reading between the lines, the message was clear. "Give us access to Emma on our terms, or we'll make your life a living hell." That same evening, Emma had the worst nightmare yet, waking up screaming. As I held her trembling body close, trying to soothe her fears, she looked up at me with tears streaming down her face. "Mommy," she whispered, "Grandpa said in my dream that I have to go live with them because you're not a good mommy. But you are a good mommy. I don't want to leave you." Something fierce and protective rose up in me as I rocked my child. This had to stop. My parents and Heather weren't just attacking me anymore. They were actively harming Emma with their campaign of intimidation. The next morning, I asked Colonel Winters and Aunt Susan to come over for an emergency discussion. I laid out everything that had happened and showed them the attorney's letter. "This is textbook emotional abuse," Aunt Susan said, her face grim. "They're trying to regain control by creating fear and instability." "What do you think I should do?" I asked. Colonel Winters considered the situation carefully. "I think you need to make a clean break," he said finally. "As long as they believe there's a chance to manipulate the situation, they'll keep trying. Sometimes, the only way to win is to remove yourself from the battlefield entirely." "But how?" I asked. "They know where we live, where Emma goes to school, where I work." "You establish absolute boundaries," Aunt Susan said firmly. "And you make it clear that there are consequences for violating those boundaries." With their help, I drafted a response to my parents' attorney. It stated in unequivocal terms that I would not be granting unsupervised visitation and that any future communication must go through my own attorney. I included documentation of the original slapping incident, the subsequent harassment, and statements from Emma's school counselor about the negative impact their actions were having on her emotional well-being. Most critically, the letter stated that if the harassment continued in any form, I would seek a formal restraining order and pursue all available legal remedies. "This feels so final," I said as I reviewed the letter before sending it. "Sometimes that's necessary for healing to begin," Aunt Susan said gently. That evening, as I was helping Emma with her homework, my phone rang with my parents' number. Against my better judgment, I answered, putting it on speaker so there would be a witness if needed. "Catherine," my father began in his most authoritative voice, "we need to discuss this ridiculous letter your so-called attorney sent." "There's nothing to discuss," I replied calmly. "The letter states my position clearly." "You cannot seriously be threatening legal action against your own parents," my mother cut in. "After everything we've done for you and Emma?" "What exactly have you done for Emma, except criticize her, deny her diagnosis, and approve of her being slapped?" I asked. There was a moment of stunned silence before my father spoke again. "You know we've established a trust fund for her education." And there it was, the leverage they had always used, the implied threat that financial support could be withdrawn if I didn't comply with their wishes. "Let me be very clear," I said, my voice steady. "Emma and I don't want or need your money. What we need is respect and basic human decency. If you can't provide that, then we don't need you in our lives at all." "You would cut us off completely?" my mother asked, sounding genuinely shocked. "Over one incident?" "It was never just one incident," I replied. "It's been a lifetime of incidents. And yes, if that's what it takes to protect Emma's emotional well-being and my own, that's exactly what I'll do." "You're making a terrible mistake," my father warned. "You've always been emotional and impulsive, Katie, but this takes it to a new level. Actually, this is probably the most carefully considered decision I've ever made," I countered. "I'm choosing my daughter's health and happiness over toxic family relationships." "That's not impulsive, that's responsible parenting." "We're changing our will," my father said abruptly, revealing what was likely meant to be his trump card. "You'll get nothing, Katie. Everything will go into a trust for Emma that we control until she's 25. How do you think she'll feel when she's older and learns that your pride cost her financial security?" The old me would have wavered at this threat. The old me would have feared that Emma might someday resent me for cutting ties with my wealthy parents. But the person I was becoming saw this for what it was, a last, desperate attempt at control. "I think when Emma is older, she'll understand that some things are more important than money," I said. "Like being raised in a home where she feels safe, valued, and respected." "You're being ridiculous," my mother snapped. "No one is threatening her safety." Her emotional safety matters just as much as her physical safety, I replied. And right now, you and Dad and Heather are actively threatening that with your behavior. So that's it? My father demanded. After everything, you're just cutting us off? No, I corrected. I'm setting boundaries. Whether those boundaries mean we have no relationship or a healthier one is entirely up to you. I ended the call feeling strangely calm. For the first time in my life, I had directly confronted my parents' manipulation tactics without backing down, without giving in to guilt or fear. Emma, who had been sitting quietly at the table during the call, looked up at me with solemn eyes. Are we really never going to see Grandma and Grandpa again? I sat down next to her and took her small hands in mine. That depends on them, sweetheart. If they can learn to be kind and respectful, then maybe someday. But for now, we need some time apart from them, so that we can both feel safe and happy. She thought about this for a moment, then nodded. I like feeling happy better than feeling scared. Me too, I said, hugging her close. That night, I made a decision that had been forming in my mind for weeks. Emma and I needed a fresh start, away from the shadow of my family's influence. With my boss's support for remote work part-time, Emma's school's understanding about a mid-year transfer, and the encouragement of our new support network, I began making plans for us to move to a smaller community about 50 miles away. It would mean a longer commute on the days I needed to be in the office, but it would also mean peace of mind, knowing we weren't constantly looking over our shoulders for unexpected confrontations. As I researched apartments in our new potential hometown, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time, a sense of hope and possibility. By choosing to walk away from toxic relationships that had defined me for so long, I was finally claiming the right to define myself, to create the life that Emma and I deserved. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, I truly believed we could navigate it successfully, together. 6 months later, Emma and I stood in the auditorium of her new school, my heart swelling with pride as she waited backstage for her turn in the spring talent show. The past half year had brought changes I could scarcely have imagined on that fateful day at the family reunion. Our move to Riverside, a charming small town with tree-lined streets and a tight-knit community, had been the fresh start we both needed. My company had been supportive of my partial remote work arrangement, and I had even received a promotion to administrative team lead after demonstrating what my boss called exceptional grace under pressure and organizational leadership. The military family support services that Colonel Winters connected us with had been invaluable. Emma was seeing Dr. Rivera, a child psychologist who specialized in ADHD and family trauma, and the transformation in my daughter was remarkable. She was learning strategies to manage her energy and focus, and more importantly, she was regaining her confidence and natural exuberance. I had started attending a support group for single parents and another for adults recovering from family trauma. The simple act of sharing my experiences with others who truly understood was profoundly healing. I was also taking parenting classes specifically designed for children with ADHD, which gave me practical tools to support Emma's unique needs. Our new apartment was smaller than our old one but filled with more joy and peace. We had painted the walls in cheerful colors together, planted flowers on our small balcony, and established routines that worked for both of us. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was creating a home based on what we wanted and needed, not on anyone else's expectations. The most surprising development had been the realignment of our extended family relationships. After the final confrontation with my parents, several relatives had reached out privately to express their support. Amanda visited regularly, becoming like a beloved aunt to Emma. Ryan and his wife invited us to their son's birthday party, integrating us into family gatherings that were free from the toxic dynamics that had defined Anderson family events. Aunt Susan had become a steady, loving presence in our lives, the grandmother figure that Emma deserved. She had moved to a retirement community just 20 minutes from our new home, claiming it was a coincidence but winking at me when she said it. As for my parents and Heather, the situation had evolved in ways I hadn't anticipated. Heather's law firm had eventually allowed her to return, but demoted her from partner to senior associate after a complete investigation revealed other concerning incidents with subordinates. She had made a single attempt to contact me with a carefully worded non-apology that managed to imply I was still at fault while technically acknowledging her overreaction. I had responded with a brief but firm message restating my boundaries. My parents had made several attempts at what they considered reconciliation, which mostly consisted of suggesting we put this unfortunate business behind us without any real acknowledgement or change. When those overtures failed, they retreated into their familiar patterns, telling family members that I was being unreasonable and stubborn. What surprised them, and honestly surprised me too, was how many people refused to accept their narrative this time. Too many had seen the truth with their own eyes, had witnessed the pattern of behavior over years, or had experienced similar treatment themselves. The support I'd found both within and outside the family had given me the strength to maintain the boundaries I'd established. I no longer feared being cut off financially because I had discovered I could stand on my own 2 feet. I no longer feared being painted as the family villain because I knew my truth and had people who could verify it. Most importantly, Emma was thriving in ways that validated every difficult decision I had made. The nightmares had stopped. The anxiety that had begun to dim her bright spirit had lifted. She was making friends, participating enthusiastically in school, and developing a healthy sense of her own worth and boundaries. "Mommy," she had said one night as I tucked her into bed, "I don't feel like there's something wrong with me anymore." Those words had brought tears to my eyes and reinforced my determination to never again allow toxic relationships to damage my child's sense of self-worth. Now, watching her waiting for her turn at the talent show, wearing a space-themed costume she had designed herself for her science presentation about the solar system, I felt a deep sense of peace and rightness. "She looks so happy," Aunt Susan whispered from beside me. "She is," I replied. "We both are." Colonel Winters, seated on my other side, nodded approvingly. "You've done good, Katie, real good." When Emma's name was announced, she stepped confidently onto the stage, her smile bright as she launched into her presentation. Combining scientific facts with a creative story about an imaginary journey through space. Her enthusiasm was infectious, drawing the audience in as she described each planet with vivid details and expansive gestures. Looking around at the audience, I saw our chosen family watching with genuine interest and affection. Amanda and her husband, Ryan and his family, Judy, who had helped us move and visited often, 3 military families who had embraced us as their own, Dr. Rivera, who had come to support her young client, and several new friends from Riverside who had welcomed us with open arms. As Emma reached the conclusion of her presentation, the audience broke into enthusiastic applause. She took a small bow, her face flushed with pride and excitement. In that moment, watching my daughter receive recognition for being exactly who she was, energetic, creative, and wonderfully unique, I knew with absolute certainty that we had made the right choice. Breaking free from the cycle of criticism, emotional manipulation, and conditional love had given both of us room to grow and flourish. Emma ran straight to me after her performance, throwing her arms around my waist. "Did you see, Mommy? They liked it." "They loved it, sweetheart," I assured her, hugging her tightly. "You were amazing up there." As the talent show continued, Emma settled between Aunt Susan and me, occasionally whispering comments about the other performers. When the event ended, our entire group gathered to celebrate with ice cream at Emma's favorite local shop. Watching my daughter surrounded by people who genuinely celebrated her uniqueness, rather than trying to suppress it, I reflected on the difficult journey that had brought us here. The path to healing hadn't been easy. There had been moments of doubt, nights when I questioned whether I was doing the right thing by maintaining such firm boundaries with my family of origin. There had been practical challenges too, financial strains and logistical complications that sometimes felt overwhelming. But sitting there in that ice cream shop, watching Emma laugh with people who loved her unconditionally, I knew that the hardest choice had also been the most necessary one. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Aunt Susan asked, sliding into the seat beside me. "I was just thinking about how much has changed," I admitted. 6 months ago, I couldn't have imagined being this at peace. She patted my hand gently. "That's because you were still trapped in their reality, Katie. Once you stepped out of it and created your own, everything changed." "I wish I'd done it sooner," I said quietly. "You did it when you were ready," she replied. "When it mattered most, For Emma, that's what counts. Later that night, after all our guests had gone, and Emma was tucked into bed, I sat on our small balcony looking at the stars. My phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. Heard through the grapevine that Heather's kids are struggling in school. Apparently Taylor got in trouble for pushing another child, and Heather's response was to blame the teacher for not controlling the classroom properly. Sound familiar? I sighed, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. Despite everything, I didn't want my niece and nephew to experience the same patterns of blame and shame that had marked my childhood. But I also recognized that I couldn't control or change Heather's parenting choices. All I could do was break the cycle in my own family line. As if reading my thoughts, Emma appeared at the balcony door in her pajamas, her hair rumpled from pillow. "Mommy? I can't sleep. I keep thinking about space and how big it is." I smiled and opened my arms. She climbed onto my lap, though she was getting almost too big for it now, and leaned against my shoulder. "After my presentation," she said thoughtfully, when everyone was clapping, "I wasn't scared at all. I used to get scared when people looked at me." "I know, sweetie," I said, smoothing her hair. "You've gotten so brave." She was quiet for a moment, looking up at the stars. "Grandma and Grandpa and Aunt Heather were wrong about us, weren't they?" I took a deep breath, wanting to be honest without passing on bitterness. "Yes, they were. Everyone has value just as they are. You don't have to be perfect to be worthy of love and respect." She nodded solemnly. "That's what Dr. Rivera says too. That we're not useless. We're brave." My throat tightened with emotion as I recognized my own words from that night after the talent show, coming back to me through my daughter's lips. "We are brave," I agreed. "And we have people who love us for real," she added. "Not just when we're being quiet and proper." I hugged her close, marveling at her wisdom and resilience. "That's right. And we always will." As I tucked her back into bed a few minutes later, she looked up at me with sleepy eyes. "Mommy? I'm glad we're us. I wouldn't want to be them." "Me too, sweetheart," I whispered, kissing her forehead. "Me too." Standing in her doorway, watching her drift off to sleep, I realized that the journey we had undertaken wasn't just about escaping toxic relationships. It was about reclaiming our right to be authentically ourselves, to define success and happiness on our own terms, and to create a family culture based on acceptance and unconditional love. By breaking free from the cycle of emotional abuse that had defined the Anderson family for generations, I had given Emma the greatest gift possible, the freedom to grow into herself without shame or fear. And in fighting for her, I had finally learned to fight for myself too. The story of what happened at that family reunion, of the slap that shocked a gathering and revealed long-hidden dynamics, wasn't just about one moment of physical violence. It was about the courage to say no more, to stand firm in the face of manipulation and control, and to choose a different path forward. It was about learning that family isn't just defined by blood, but by how people treat each other, by the safety and acceptance they offer, by their willingness to respect boundaries and acknowledge mistakes. Most of all, it was about discovering that sometimes, the most loving choice you can make for yourself and your children is to walk away from relationships that diminish, rather than nurture, that demand conformity, rather than celebrating uniqueness, that condition love on performance, rather than offering it freely. In the peaceful quiet of our new home, with Emma sleeping soundly just down the hall, I finally understood the profound truth that had been waiting for me all along. True strength isn't found in enduring mistreatment or meeting impossible expectations. It's found in having the courage to protect yourself and those you love, in establishing healthy boundaries, and in creating a life defined by joy rather than fear. My sister had slapped my daughter in front of everyone. My parents had laughed. But in the end, we were the ones who found freedom, healing, and genuine happiness, the greatest victory of all. Have you ever had to make the difficult decision to distance yourself from toxic family relationships for your own well-being, or to protect someone you love? What gave you the strength to establish those boundaries? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear this message of hope and healing. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you courage and peace on your own path to authentic living.